This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, I'm Nitsahone, and it is Wednesday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. In this video, we're going to be looking at the avatar creature type. I was inspired to make this list because one avatar in particular, Hogak, was so dominant in Modern that it had to be banned. That made me wonder how it stacks up against the other avatars in the game, and that's what you're about to find out. So, what is an avatar anyway? Well, they are beings that are the manifestation of a larger power. We'll see avatars in this list that are the embodiments of particular planes, of forces of nature, and of various ideals. Because of their flavor, avatars tend to be pretty powerful creatures that only appear at higher rarities. To be eligible for this list, a card had to have the avatar creature type, produce an avatar creature token, or be able to become an avatar. Under these criteria, 86 cards were eligible for this list, and in this video, we'll talk about the 10 of them that have left the biggest impact on tournament Magic. Before we get started, a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. Pro Tour and Mythic Championship top 8s, as well as Legacy and Vintage Championship top 8s are worth 2 points, and a Grand Prix top 8 is worth 1 point. Now, let's go to number 10. At number 10, we have WILLOW, an avatar who is the incarnation of the Great Wood on the plane of Olgratha. As you can see, she didn't have the avatar creature type from the beginning. Back in those days, legendary creatures usually didn't have creature types other than legend. These days, though, she has been errated to have the avatar creature type. WILLOW may not seem super impressive to us today, but a 6-mana 4/4 with Shroud was the real deal back then. There were lots of good removal spells around, and none of it could be used on her. She received all 6 of her points at Pro Tour New York in 1996, where she was the top curve for various green aggro decks. WILLOW's position on this list is in serious trouble, though, since she hasn't been played at all since 1996, and she won't, because she is easily outclassed by other creatures these days. Avatars aren't the most common creature type around, but I'm fairly certain we'll see one knock her off this list within a year or two. At number 9, we have Soul of INNISTRAD, which is the physical embodiment of that plane. Many planes have a world soul that is a sentient entity and physical manifestation of the plane. Soul of INNISTRAD is part of a cycle of these souls that appear in Magic 2015, and it is the only card from that cycle to make this list. All the creatures in this cycle are 6-mana 6/6 that have a color-appropriate keyword, an ability they can use while in play, and a similar ability they can use from the graveyard by exiling themselves. Soul of INNISTRAD provides you with serious card advantage if it stays in play, since returning 3 creatures to your hand from your graveyard is no joke. The Soul only saw play in Standard, where it was mostly featured in Sultai Whip decks. These were reanimation decks that, like most of them, milled themselves a bunch, so having a creature that can be a reanimation target while also giving you some value out of the graveyard is pretty great. The Soul hasn't seen play since 2015, and like WILLOW, it might be in a little bit of trouble on this list going forward. At number 8, we have Avatar of Woe. This avatar is part of a cycle of avatars from Prophecy, all of which embody a particular color of mana, and all of which can reduce their casting cost if certain conditions are met. Avatar of Woe is the only avatar from that cycle to make this list, and I think it is pretty clear that it is far and away the best in that cycle. Between having an evasive ability in Fear, being able to tap to destroy creatures, and having a reduced casting cost that it isn't that difficult to get going, Avatar of Woe is a pretty frightening creature. Avatar of Woe picked up all 7 points in Extended and all in reanimation decks. The Avatar could be a reanimation target in a pinch in those decks, but the fact that these decks were already interested in loading up their graveyard meant it wasn't unheard of for these decks to cast Avatar of Woe for only 2 black mana. At number 7, we have a land that makes an avatar token in Dark Depths. Dark Depths is a card that was considered pretty bad when it first debuted. It was too slow to ever really be a threat, but eventually cards were printed that allowed you to rapidly remove all the counters from it at once, and this meant you could get the avatar token really early. Combo decks emerged and Extended that used Vampire Hexmage to get the token as early as turn 2. This deck showed up in Extended's waning years, but when Modern was created to replace it in 2011, Dark Depths was on the ban list for the format, and remains there until this day. In Legacy, Dark Depths helped spawn the Lands deck, a deck loaded up with a bunch of easily tutorable utility lands, and the main win condition for the deck is a Dark Depths combo. This one doesn't use Vampire Hexmage, but instead uses Thespian Stage to get the giant avatar token. Dark Depths is still a relevant card in Legacy right now, and it's going to continue to accumulate points in the coming years. At number 6 is AEON Chronicler, an avatar with the suspend mechanic. The Chronicler's flavor isn't exactly clearly stated anywhere, but based on the art, name, and effect, I think it's a physical embodiment of time or perhaps knowledge of time. The Chronicler gets most of its power not from being cast, but from being suspended. Unlike most cards with suspend, the Chronicler does stuff for you while it is suspended, drawing you an extra card every turn as long as it is. It was featured pretty heavily in block control decks and also found some success in standard control decks. At number 5 is Progenitus, which, like Soul of Innistrad, is a world soul. In the case of Progenitus, it is the embodiment of the plane of Alara. One of the most powerful creatures in the entire game, at least in a vacuum, Progenitus is almost impossible to deal with if it ever comes into play because it has protection from everything. Obviously, it has an incredibly difficult mana cost, but the decks it has appeared in over the years get around that by cheating it into play. There weren't good ways to do that in either standard or block, and as a result, Progenitus was never played in either format. In Extended, it was used in Hypergenesis decks, a deck that would ultimately have to get banned out of existence. Legacy is where Progenitus has seen the most play, and that makes sense because that format has lots of ways to cheat creatures into play. For example, in Legacy, it's been put into play using Natural Order, Sneak Attack, and Show and Tell. While Progenitus hasn't been played anywhere since 2016, I don't think we can completely count out this Hydra avatar just yet. At number 4, we have AJANI GOLDMANE, a planeswalker who can make an avatar creature token. Like many other AJANIs, he has an ability that gains you life, and another one that makes your creatures better. The avatar token he can make with his ultimate works well with life gain since the creature has power and toughness equal to your life total. He saw a lot of play in aggressive white decks, while in standard, especially in Kithkin and black-white tokens. He was also featured in Lorwyn block constructed Kithkin decks. At number 3, we have Hogak, Arisen Necropolis, the card that inspired me to make this list. That's right, even though Hogak was only in Modern for a matter of months, it did so much while it was legal that it has a pretty firm hold on the number 3 spot on this list. It turned out to be way too easy to get enough cards into your graveyard to cast Hogak on turn 2. This is thanks in part to the broken dredge mechanic, which really made it easy to cast a cheap Hogak. This avatar was even better when Bridge from Below was legal in the format because you can not only load up your graveyard, you can make zombie tokens that could help you convoke. Wizards first only banned the Bridge, but Hogak was still too good, and as a result, it got banned. While he is banned in Modern, it is important to note that he also sees play in Legacy Dredge decks that have top 8s at Legacy Championships already. This means that while Hogak has certainly been slowed by the Modern banning, he's probably going to continue to accumulate points going forward, and while it may be difficult for him to ever be number 1 on this list, I think number 2 is a distinct possibility. Speaking of number 2, that's where we have Figure of Destiny, a Kithkin who can gradually get stronger as you pump more mana into him, and once he reaches his final form, he gains the Avatar creature type. Figure of Destiny put up all of its points in aggro decks. It was well suited to them because it did something a lot of aggro creatures can't. Aggro decks can really get into trouble if they start flooding, because the longer the game goes on, the more the opponent's chances of winning increase. Your opponent can stabilize against you, they can get creatures into play to stop you from attacking them with your smaller creatures. But Figure of Destiny gives you a 1-drop that you can pump all that extra mana into, effectively allowing you to add to the board even while you're flooding. In Block and Standard, he was mostly featured in Kithkin and Mono-Red aggro decks. In Extended, he was played solely in White Weenie decks. While the figure has a lead on Hogak, it hasn't been played since 2011, and Hogak is going to be putting up more points in Legacy going forward. It will be interesting to see how long it takes for Hogak to overtake the Figure of Destiny. And at number 1, we have Death's Shadow, which seems to be a physical embodiment of, well, death. Death's Shadow has some similarities to Dark Depths, in that it was a card that was considered bad for a really long time. Then, a few years after being printed, a deck emerged in Modern that could really abuse it. The deck had multiple effects that it paid life for, and it could quickly make the Death's Shadow into a huge monster that only cost a single mana, and now it could win games in a single shot with the help of Temur Battle Rage. The earliest versions of this deck were called Death's Shadow Zoo, and they had a more aggressive bent. But more recently, the preferred Death's Shadow build has become either Grixis or Jund, both of which are more mid-rangey decks that don't actually run that many creatures. Death's Shadow has also found some success in Legacy and blue-black decks. Death's Shadow was quieted for a while, in part thanks to the dominance of fellow avatar Hogak, but with it banned, I think it's safe to say we're going to be seeing more of Death's Shadow going forward. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to see the over 200 other MTG Top 10s I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.